For our wedding anniversary, my husband Mark handed me a small velvet box. Inside, nestled on a cushion of cream-colored silk, was a vintage watch. Its ivory dial was framed with delicate gold, and the strap, made of worn, supple leather, felt incredibly soft to the touch. "Happy anniversary, darling," Mark whispered. His eyes sparkled with genuine affection. He gently took the watch from the box and fastened it around my wrist. "Found it at an antique store," he said. "It reminded me of you, elegant and timeless." I was enchanted. The watch truly was beautiful. It had the aura of something with a story, sophisticated and refined. I thanked Mark, hugged him, and kissed him. His attentiveness and care always meant the world to me. He had a way of making me feel seen. That evening, Mark was unusually tender. He cooked my favorite dinner, roast duck with apples, lit candles, and played quiet romantic music. We reminisced about the early years of our marriage, laughed at old memories, and dreamed about our future together. I felt loved. Cherished. And it seemed like our bond was only growing stronger with time. But the next day, the first time I wore the watch to work, I began to feel unwell. At first, it was just mild fatigue and an odd sense of unease, like something was brewing deep inside me. Then came a slight headache and dizziness. I brushed it off as exhaustion. Finals were coming up at the university, and I had a heavy teaching load. Probably just overworked, I told myself, forcing focus during my lecture. But the symptoms only intensified. My thoughts became fuzzy. Words tangled in my mouth. Black dots swam across my vision. I barely made it through the class. When I got home, the moment I took off the watch, a wave of relief washed over me. A strange cooling sensation spread through my body. The weakness faded. My head cleared. The anxiety eased. Was it possible the watch was causing this? I told myself it had to be coincidence. Just to test it, I wore the watch again the next day. Same symptoms. Weakness. Dizziness. Nausea. But every time I took it off, I felt better. Sharper. More grounded. And then there was something else, a faint red rash on my wrist where the clasp had touched my skin. The skin looked irritated and slightly inflamed. I told Mark about it, hoping he'd take me seriously. "You're overreacting," he said with a smile, pulling me into an embrace. "It's probably just a nickel allergy or something. If it gets worse, we'll see a doctor." He always did this, dismissed my concerns, called me emotional, said I had a tendency to exaggerate. But I couldn't ignore what my body was telling me. Something was wrong. And slowly, I began watching Mark more closely. His behavior had changed. He was more distant, irritated, spending more time away. He'd take calls and whispers on the balcony, saying it was work stress. But I knew something was off. One night, while he was in the shower, I checked his phone. I scrolled through his call log and texts, nothing obvious. Then I opened his email. And that's when I saw it. From an unknown sender, "The watch is ready. Waiting for payment." My heart dropped. What did it mean? I slammed the phone shut and tried to breathe. Something was happening, something dark. That's when I decided, I needed to find out what this watch really was. The next day, I called my friend Erin. She's a lawyer and one of the few people I trusted with my life. I told her everything. Erin listened carefully. "You need to have that watch checked," she said. "There could be something hidden inside. Maybe it's just a defect, or maybe it's something much worse." She was right. I had to know the truth. I found a small pawnshop on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it looked trustworthy. A sign above the door read, "Appraisals and Antique Watches." Inside, it smelled of old wood and lemon polish. Behind the counter stood a man in his late 50s, with thick gray eyebrows and steady hands. His name tag read, Miles, Appraiser. "Hi," I said, my voice trembling a bit. "I'd like to get these evaluated." I placed the vintage watch, Mark's gift, on the glass counter. Miles picked it up, slid on a pair of glasses, and began examining it with a loupe. He studied it in silence, rotating it, inspecting the clasp, opening the case back. I watched him, barely breathing. After several minutes, his expression changed. He cleared his throat. "These are interesting," he said slowly. "They've been modified." My skin prickled. Modified? How? I've been working with watches for over 30 years. These are vintage, yes, but this clasp here. He pointed at the tiniest seam I hadn't noticed before. That's not original. Something's been welded in. Professionally. Quietly. But it's not from the factory. I leaned in. The seam was nearly invisible, perfectly aligned with the metal. What could it be? I asked, heart pounding. "I can't say for sure without opening it," he said. Then he paused. "But I have my suspicions. Very bad ones." He put on gloves, pulled out a precision tool, and gently opened the clasp mechanism. Inside was a micro-thin capillary tube, so fine it looked like a strand of hair. "There's a substance in here," he murmured. He held it up to the light. Clear. Odorless. Definitely not water. I felt the room spin. What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Miles looked me straight in the eye. "I'm not a toxicologist. But I've seen something like this before. Slow-acting poison. Designed to make someone sick gradually. No obvious cause. Just, illness." I stumbled back from the counter. Poison. In the watch. But who? Mark. The way he had been acting. The late-night calls. The evasiveness. The email. Everything snapped into place like a sickening puzzle. "You've been wearing this?" Miles asked, horrified. I nodded slowly. "Every day. It was a gift from my husband. For our anniversary." Miles shook his head. "Go to the police. Immediately. And don't tell anyone, especially not him. Only people you trust with your life." I stood frozen, heart hammering in my chest. Mark wanted me dead. Miles poured me a glass of water and slid it toward me. "You need to pull yourself together. For your safety." I took a few sips, trying to calm my nerves. What should I do next? I asked, desperate. "Don't wear the watch again. Give it to the police. Let them test the substance. And be careful. Act normal. Tell no one. Especially not your husband." I nodded, trembling. "Thank you," I said. "You might have just saved my life." He didn't smile. Just nodded grimly. "I hope so. But now it's up to you." I left the pawnshop shaken to the core. My hands trembled as I drove home, replaying every recent moment with Mark, his detachment, his whispers, the email. I had to know the truth. And I couldn't wait. That night, I acted normal. Smiled. Ate dinner. Said I had a headache and went to bed early. Once Mark fell asleep, I quietly slipped into his office. I tried his laptop. Password. Our anniversary date. It worked. I scanned his inbox. At first, it was just work emails, bills, routine stuff. Then I found her. "Samantha. I miss you. When will I see you again?" she had written. "Soon, darling," he replied. "We just need to be patient. Everything's nearly done." I felt sick. Cheeks burning. My chest tight. But that wasn't the worst of it. There was another thread. From an encrypted email. Anonymous. Discussions of precision, delivery, and clean methods. Mark had replied, just make sure there are no signs. It needs to look natural. I copied everything. Screenshotted every message. Every attachment. I remembered what Miles said, trust no one. I called Erin again. We need a toxicologist, I said. Someone we can trust. She found one. A discreet expert. We handed over the capillary tube from the watch. The wait was agonizing, 2 days of no sleep, walking on eggshells around Mark, faking smiles, pretending nothing was wrong. Then Erin called. Her voice was grim. It's thallium, she said. Slow acting. Extremely toxic. It attacks the nervous system over time. My legs gave out. I sank onto the floor. Anna, she said, we're going to the police. We gathered everything, emails, screenshots, the pawnshop report, the lab results. Even the photos of my rash. I remembered the appraiser's name, Miles, and he agreed to testify if needed. Erin also tracked down the wife of the jeweler who had done the watch modifications. He had died just weeks earlier. A sudden heart attack. Her name was Eleanor. She lived alone on the outskirts of town. I visited her under the pretense of wanting to learn more about vintage watch craftsmanship. When I described the piece and asked if her late husband had worked on such a commission, she froze. My husband kept a journal, she said quietly. He was disturbed by one job. A man insisted on modifying an antique clasp in a very particular way. Said it was a surprise for his wife. My husband didn't want to do it. But we needed the money. Did he mention who it was? No, she said. But he said the man was powerful. He seemed afraid. And how did your husband die? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Heart attack, she whispered. But he had no heart problems. Never did. I thanked her and left. My suspicions had turned to horror. This wasn't just betrayal. It was murder. Planned. Precise. Cold. With Erin at my side, I walked into the local precinct and asked to speak with a detective. We were referred to Detective James Harrison, a seasoned officer in his late 40s, with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. I sat down in his office and began to tell my story, from the anniversary gift to the symptoms, the pawnshop visit, the toxicology report, the emails, and the widow's testimony. I laid out the evidence, screenshots, printed emails, medical records, lab results, photos of the watch, the capillary tube. Detective Harrison didn't interrupt once. He just listened, asked precise questions, and took notes. Finally, he said, "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Spencer." "I have everything," I said. "I know my husband tried to kill me." He nodded slowly. "We'll open an investigation. If what you're saying checks out, we'll move forward." The next 24 hours crawled by. Then, in the early evening, my phone rang. Harrison's voice came through the line. "Anna, we've detained your husband. He's in custody." I felt my knees buckle. My breath caught in my throat. It was real. I was safe. At the station, I gave my full statement under oath. Every detail. Every suspicion. Every moment of fear. Meanwhile, Mark denied everything. Claimed the watch was an innocent gift. Said I was unstable. That I'd fabricated the entire thing out of some twisted emotional breakdown. But the lab tests told a different story. So did the encrypted emails. The pawnshop report. The life insurance policy in my name. And the widow? She agreed to testify that her husband had been forced to make the modifications, and had been terrified after. Days later, Mark was formally charged with attempted murder. As the investigation continued, more truths surfaced. Mark was drowning in debt. He had taken out a large life insurance policy on me just a month before our anniversary. Samantha wasn't just a fling, she was part of the plan. Emails between them confirmed they'd been discussing a future together and making it look natural. And then came the worst revelation. The jeweler's death. Not natural. Evidence linked Mark to threatening calls made from a burner phone to Eleanor's husband. He had pressured him, threatened him, and then, days later, the man was found dead. The cause was reclassified as suspicious. Mark was now facing charges for not only attempted murder, but conspiracy and potential involvement in a second death. I didn't go to the trial. I couldn't. I didn't want to see him, his face, his eyes, the mask of the man I once loved. But I followed the case through Aaron and the news. The evidence was overwhelming. The emails. The forensic report. The witness testimonies. The motive. The money. The affair. The life insurance. The jury took less than a day. Mark Spencer was found guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice. The judge called the crime calculated, premeditated, and unforgivable. He was sentenced to decades in prison. In the months that followed, I tried to piece myself back together. I moved to a new apartment. Changed jobs. Changed cities. Started therapy. Cut ties with anyone who reminded me of him. I bought myself a new watch, not vintage, not mysterious, just clean and modern. Practical. Honest. And when I buckled it around my wrist for the first time, I felt something shift deep inside me. It was over. I had survived. Time, my time, belonged to me again. I'm still healing. I probably will be for a long time. But I'm free.